Good evening, everyone. We're calling the May Planning Division meeting to order, and we'll start by having the Pledge to Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Again, welcome, everyone. The first item of business is to review and approve the minutes from our meeting of April 24th. Any commissioners have any comments, questions about the minutes? If not, would someone like to motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve the April 24th, 2023 minutes as presented.
Someone like to second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of April 24th. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? They are approved. We now have time for public comment. If anyone out there in the public wishes to make a comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to old business. And our first item of business, at the request of the applicant, they've asked us to pull this item. It was a continuing discussion about the proposed text amendment that's intended to create a new section in the town code, a new economic development flex district. And we will continue discussion about that at our June meeting. So moving on to our, what I see is the only item of business this evening, and that's a review of our comprehensive plan. So Chris, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's kind of fortuitous on some level that there's been a delay to speak about the flex zone or the floating zone because it gives the commission a chance to talk about the comprehensive plan a little bit.
Yeah.
It's always good to have the comp plan at top of mind when you think about writing a new zoning district that's going to shape the way a major part of the town could develop in the future. Not that we'll have all the answers after tonight, but at least we're thinking about it.
Mhm.
And I won't be at the next meeting, So I'm gonna give you everything I can tonight on the comprehensive plan. And,
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the view of the town from the helicopter that Najela and I were on this morning. No, we weren't. But that's from the website, and I think it's a fantastic photo. A lot of the plan talks about sustainability and preserving the environment and the natural heritage of the town. And of course, that heritage is expressed in the landscape, which on many levels hasn't changed. Elements have changed, of course, as subdivisions have been developed, but in the big picture, that's perfect. It's much better. Yes, things have not changed. So let's have the next slide. Okay, I wanted to begin with just summarizing the main goals that were discussed as the 2009 goals. And they begin on page 1-2 and go through, I think, 1-4 or something of the plan. And the plan that you have is the 2015 comp plan. It updated the 2009 plan, and it reaffirmed the major goals and approaches to the plan. It changed some things, and it had to meet new state requirements. So it's somewhat different. It's a lot different, actually, but it reaffirmed the main goals. And I want to review those because these goals are kind of foundational. And if there's at any point the commission wants to veer away from these goals, we should talk about it. And it's okay to have that discussion, but these are foundational, and a lot of different recommendations and strategies ought to flow from these goals. And if you commit to these type of ideas, then you should be able to see that expressed on the landscape decade after decade. So first is conserve and protect Emmitsburg's unique natural setting and cultural heritage. I really like that photo on the bottom. That's an illustration of Union troops moving through Emmitsburg during the Civil War. And I like the image of the motorcycle club in the center of town. And that photograph is just on the other side of you in the conference room behind this wall. And I really like that sense of character. Next slide. Second major goal is maintain and protect the historic character and architectural integrity of Main Street, which is vital to the future of the downtown and the community. And I sense there's a continued commitment to that particular goal as well. Next. Oh, by the way, as we talk about each one of these, in the report, there's the statement of the goal, then there's some description of what it means for Emmitsburg, and then there's a statement of principle, like, well, why this type of goal is so important to municipalities generally. So it's kind of a statement of goal, how it applies to the town, and its relevance generally to comprehensive planning. And I think if the layperson read the first 3 or 4 pages under these goals, they'd have a pretty good understanding where the commitments are for planning in the town. Provide environmental stewardship within the town as well as the surrounding area, and recognize the accessibility and mobility, or the importance of accessibility, mobility, transportation, and land use planning. When you think about accessibility and mobility, think about the possibility of a flex zone and where it's located and the density development there and how people maneuver through the community. That's kind of what we think about as planners, as citizen planners. New development has to be accessible. And how do we make that accessible? What improvements have to go along with a new zoning? This is a really neat image. And you know where that is, of course, just on South Seaton, headed out of town. See, things do change. So, plans do work. I actually stopped by and I read the historic monument. I don't know if you saw it at Tom's Creek there. It talks about Eisenhower being there and doing a big national field trip to kind of establish some basis rationale for the interstate highway system. And they had to build a way around this because it had flooded when he arrived. So anyway, maybe Emmitsburg had a role to play in the interstate highway system funding. Okay, next slide. Ensure that public facilities are adequate to accommodate growth. And there we're mostly talking about parks, water, sewer, and roads. Those are the big ones that municipalities deal with and Emmitsburg has dealt with. Recognize and participate in regional interstate opportunities. Here the plan even mentions Pennsylvania and Gettysburg and of course Frederick County. And lastly, foster the economic growth of Emmitsburg. And I put a quote in there from well, not quote, but a statement from a county economic development strategy. In Frederick County through 2040, 12,900 jobs are projected in the office and light industrial sectors. And so the question is obviously, what share of that is the town going to go after and make possible? And those are the kind of jobs and development that generate a lot of tax base for the community. Next. So a little bit about population. On the left, you see the population 2000, 2010, and 2020. You see that 2020, we had 2,290 people. 2010, 2814. And then between 2010 and 2020, the population dropped. It actually dropped by 44 people or 1.6%. That was the decline in population that the town saw. But over the longer term, and we look longer term, you have almost a 21% increase over the past 20 years. And in terms of housing units, I just have the data right here for 2010 and 2020. The difference is plus 31. So it's almost a 3% increase over the past decade. So you might say, you know, the population has fallen while the number of housing units rose. How's that possible? I mean, we're getting more development, and yet our population is declining. Not a lot, but over the past decade. So it's a question to ponder. Anybody have a perspective on that? why it might be.
Daughters of Charity moving their province to St. Louis was a major factor.
Yeah, there were quite a few what we call group quarters population, people that don't live in housing units per se, but are counted as part of the population. And there's also a trend that's happening across the board. It's smaller household sizes. Families have just gotten much smaller in households, except for some urban areas where housing prices have really skyrocketed. Overall, the number of people per household is plummeting. So that Joe, I think those two trends, the one you mentioned and one I mentioned, are what's at work to see that slight decrease. So as part of the comprehensive plan, we have to write a municipal growth element and forecast the future. The current plan doesn't have a forecast or projection of future growth, but the new plan will have a forecast and probably have alternative forecasts so that we can see, you know, what's reasonable high and reasonable low. And then you can have discussion about where you want to generally head towards. And the reason we do that is because we want to make sure that we have a good handle on what's possible and that we're planning for the infrastructure. So in 2040, when we get there, we'll be prepared for what's necessary. Or if we see where we can't satisfy the growth, we might need to go back and rejigger the land use a little bit to reduce the amount of growth. You know, if the town can't accommodate future growth, it's got to plan for a different future. And those discussions are really what happens during the comprehensive plan stage. Next. This is probably the most important part of the whole plan. There's a lot of text that goes with this. This is the future land use map. And essentially, this is what the planners in 2015 imagined the town would look like in 2030. Their design year was 2030. They were looking at out at 2030. So each of the colors on the map signify some policy recommendation. If just look at the green areas on the map, that's the conservation parks area. And I highlighted that first because the parcel on the east side of Route 15 is the parcel that would be most impacted by the flex zone discussion. The flex zone, the floating zone, the floating zone / flex economic development zone, because that's a large parcel and it would be eligible for that. Now, the comprehensive plan says that those areas that are shaded green are not meant to be preserved forever, that they're in a sense a reserve zone to become developable when water and sewer facilities are found by the town to be adequate. So when this plan was put together, the thinking was in 2030, by 2030, we're still going to show this as green conservation, but we're going to acknowledge that between 2015 and 2030, things may work towards redeveloping or to developing this parcel. Now you might say, well, what about Community Park? That's green and no one imagines that's going to be developed. It's true. It's just sort of a quirky part of the way the zone or the comprehensive plan is written. And I think we should fix that because one could rationalize that house that's somehow eligible for development in the future too, but of course it's not. The other big bright color that stands out is the suburban commercial. It kind of blends in with the town commercial, but it's the blood red area that's both on the east and west sides of 15. And as you get closer to the interchange with 140, that's where Rudders is, as an example. And that's called suburban commercial and town commercial. They're two elements, and the recommendations differ somewhat, but not a lot on the main recommendations. And then the employment center is the purple. Purple is usually a color that's associated with industrial development on these maps. And that area is in fact in the process of actively developing and building out according to the plan. And that's where the town's industrial part is. The lighter blue is institutional uses, government and community buildings. And then the other colors on the map are various forms of residential, well, except for the village core. Let's just focus on that. If you see the pattern, the kind of the, I don't know what, the red and white, looks like a soccer jersey or something, that runs along Main Street and then a bit down South Seaton towards Town Hall, or to where we are tonight, I guess I should say. That area is village core, and that's a mixed use zoning category. And then the residential is elsewhere. We've got a kind of a suburban residential, and then more of a town residential, which is the more traditional parts, the more denser parts, smaller lots, walkable parts of town. Well, let's go to the next slide, and we might come back to this. So here's the zoning map that the town adopted after that plan was approved. So the zoning map codifies the land use recommendations. And you can see there's quite a bit of consistency. I will note that the B2, the general commercial zone, that encompasses both the suburban and the town commercial uses. So, you know, operationally, there's not much difference between those two kind of soft land use categories. They're all zoned for one use, one set of uses, that's B2. But you can see the zoning categories, the CR, conservation recreation zone, equates exactly with the land use category on the land use map. And we have two industrial zones, the office research institutional zone and the industrial park zone, or IP. All right, next slide. This is a map showing the town's adopted growth area, along with the various streams in town, and the lighter shade lines on the map are contour lines, and we're not going to really focus on those, except that just to say wherever there's a lot of density of contour lines, there's obviously changes in the elevation, big hills or steep slopes. But generally, everything that's gray on the map is in the town already. Everything that's within the red line, but not gray, is eligible for annexation. It's eligible to meet annexation if the applicant or the petitioner can prove annexations in the town's interest. Okay. So when you think about where will the town grow in the future, the town will grow within that red line. Unless you change that as part of your comprehensive plan, you might decide to widen it or narrow it. But in any case, that is each cycle of comprehensive planning, you're asked to reevaluate this map and decide if the boundaries are still good for the town. Okay. Next. So there's the same kind of geometry, but now you have various colors on this map, and everything that's in the town is shown as that speckled blue. And then each of those different patterns represent a proposed land use type or an approach to development, a general policy, idea. You see a small little bit of agricultural land up in the north part, and then the red stripe patterns, that seems to mean medium density residential, right? So medium density residential seems to wrap around the town on the north side and then on the east side. Yes, sir.
Question. So in regard to annexation, and it's designated on the map here what the proposed land use would be. Now, assume someone's coming in and wants to annex a certain property and it's, let's say, zone low density residential. Can the applicant, since it's not really zoned that yet, can the applicant request a different zoning at that time?
No, the annexation has to be for a land use that's consistent with the comprehensive plan. So if
Yeah.
you've taken efforts to show low density or whatever the case, high density,
Yeah, whatever.
that is the controlling land use for it. So the person that wants to be annexed has the choice. I can annex under this plan or this plan use, or I can choose not to annex. Or practically speaking, someone could come to the town and say, I'd like to annex, but this land use is just not going to work for me. Would you consider amending the comprehensive plan, redrawing it, perhaps, maybe put low density in just half of it and, or whatever, work it out with me. And that's a legitimate approach, as long as it's done in the public setting and public hearings. And sometimes it could really work out well for everybody.
So they can make that request.
Certainly, yeah, you can make an amendment to the comprehensive plan at any point.
Okay.
You just have to go through the normal review process. It's lengthy, but still,
Yeah.
it's possible to be done. It's
So-
often done at municipal levels.
So if a piece of land is outside of the annex map of the town,
Oh, yeah.
is it governed by the comprehensive plan? Are they free to suggest whatever they want and the request that it be annexed into the town?
Oh, okay. So if it's outside of the growth area,
Right.
they're not eligible for annexation, but they could ask to redraw the boundary. And in other words, please amend your comprehensive plan to include my property within your growth area. And at that time of amendment, we would suggest a growth or a land use category. And anything else you want to suggest. The town of Hampstead in Carroll County, a couple years ago, they resolved some longstanding water issues. So their development prospects went expansive, and developers responded to that and petitioned the town to be annexed. Well, their boundaries was appropriately drawn for their capacity. Now they had capacity in their water system, so they considered it. So they went through the process and they held public hearings and they made a recommendation. They basically adopted amendments to their plan in the same way that they adopt the plan. Sent it to the state sent comments back. 60 days later, they adopted the plan. And then they proceeded to do the annexations.
Chris, are we
Yes.
just simply hitting the highlights tonight, and we'll review this map in greater detail when we come to that section in the book?
That was my intent, but I can answer, and Najila can too, any questions we can take a stab at, or we can jot your question down and be
Well, I don't
prepared.
have any specific questions yet, but I would like to look at this map in terms of the rest of the comprehensive plan, in terms of growth and what expectations are and utilities and so on and so forth.
Perfect. Then I've achieved my goal to interest you guys enough to go spend some time with it. And yeah, thank you.
Perfect,
I
thank you.
Valerie, I appreciate that,
Thank you.
actually. So anyway, this is the town's prospect. And so this, by the way, for folks who may be watching this at home, this doesn't say that the town has to grow to this area or that it will grow by 2030, but it says if anybody in those areas are petitioned to the town for annexation, the town will consider it. But if you're outside of the area, the town's not interested. That's the policy. Let's see if there's another slide. This is the same thing, but it's a 2015 version. I showed you the 2021 version. So I think this is an older version. And the first one was updated, this one. Next. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. While you take those images in, I wanted to highlight some things, because I like to know what the meaning of terms are and what they mean in terms of design and expectations. And I would want you to have some high expectations for what development you would like to see in the future. At least having what is acceptable and what may not be acceptable. And you could feature images like this within your plan. There is an executive summary in this plan, and I would encourage everybody to read it, and includes the 12 statements of vision. And the third one says the historic character of Emmitsburg's Main Street is a valued asset for the town and will be conserved, as well as serve as a model for newer development and architectural character. Wow, what a statement. I mean, if you really believe that, how does that shape how you deal with site plans that come in before you? Because you have an opportunity to try to create something that looks more like Main Street or not. And that the only body in town government that has, or anywhere that has any authority to implement that is you, the planning commission. Okay. Now the town council can of course adopt standards and zoning ordinance standards, which you would ultimately recommend. But the kind of the buck stops with you, and you have the authority to recommend various zoning standards and other design standards to help implement it. So when you begin, so the way this conversation can be connected to the floating zone discussion is the floating zone is an economic development commercial zone. So you will be thinking, I hope, next month and months following as you grapple with this, what the development of that area might look like. And a site that's over 150 acres is hard to conceptualize now. And you don't have to have it all figured out. But a parcel of that magnitude located with such great accessibility to the highway and visibility on a growing traffic corridor will look different in the future. And it will not just be a collection of warehouses or a collection of kind of fast food places, because they would not look like the town's character. And so if those are the uses that go there, you have to think about how do those uses align with our vision for how Emmitsburg is going to be? Because you have a parcel of land, attractive land along the highway there that's bigger than the entire historic core of downtown, right? So you can imagine the effect it will have forever in shaping the town's future. So thinking about how the development of that area will work is really critical before adopting the authority to approve those. Now, you might not have it all figured out, but the important thing is, in the mayor's words, is there be appropriate guardrails in the process so that the planning commission can protect the town's interest as these things develop. So when we're walking through the comprehensive plan, we're going to be talking about kind of the vision, the possibility, and the guardrails that are important to get into the plan, so that you can say, whoa, that's not right. Or we care about this. We're willing to go a little bit to see how it works. Let's revisit this in 5 years kind of. But you're going to be navigating this, the planning commission, and ultimately a project or a parcel of land that's that big will probably have generations of planning commission members involved in it. And that's good, but and now as you're writing the plan, you want to make sure you set the sheet of music for future commissions to sing from. And so I looked at these images and I thought to myself, well, these are kind of neat. There's things in there that speak to the goals in the current plan, like mixed use, walkability, like a historic character, and economic development opportunities. And you might think, well, surely there's not a market demand in Emmitsburg for buildings this tall. But then all you have to do is look at the Sleep Inn near Silo Hill Road and see, sure there is. Look at that. That's a very tall building. And it's as tall, or if not taller than the structures that you see here. Now, the picture on the lower left, that's at a scale that's really quite fantastic. And I don't know that that's in the short-term future of Emmitsburg. Having said that, you only have to think about the build out of the industrial land in the Route 15 corridor in Frederick County. Where else will economic development happen in the future, if not in places like Emmitsburg and Thurmont in this corridor, right? So that is not far-fetched if you think about it long-term. And corridors like this have developed throughout the country, and they gradually develop and at a scale like this. So there may be a real possibility that real density, real development potential exists in those parcels in future decades. And this body here tonight, we think long-term, not just immediate. So I want you to think about that kind of stuff. And this is an interesting concept. You see the amount of open space, and it's obviously very walkable, but it's right up on the highway. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on there. But the main thing I wanted to point out with the other images, the other four, is that they're really kind of walkable and they're scaled to humans and they're mixed use. They would allow for residential nearby because people don't walk in a walkable community if people don't live nearby. There's no way of making anything walkable if there's no place to walk to. And so the whole idea of walkability has to permeate everything. That you can't just build sidewalks and call it walkable. It's a land use question. And if that's, you can think of a barbell, you know, with Main Street and the historic on one side, and then this flex zone on the other side. If it's going to be walkable and look like downtown, it's probably going to have things like parks and open spaces and people and institutions in it at a scale that can create some walkability.
Back to that issue just a bit.
Yes.
So I don't want to get too much into the proposed text amendment,
Right.
but as I recall, they weren't envisioning any residential in that flex district.
Right.
And both Joe and I brought that up last time. And if you're talking about a walkable community, I mean, if no one's living there, I mean, how walkable can you make it?
Well-
I mean, you can make it walkable from business to business to business, but
Yeah.
it's not like people will be living nearby. They'll be on the other side of the highway.
Right. Well, a couple of things. They did say that they hadn't contemplated residential, but then they said, but we wouldn't be opposed to it. I
Yeah.
remember reading the minutes
Did
before the
hear
meeting. And so the question is, there's a question of what they want to propose, but there's a question of what the town
Right.
wants to propose. And ultimately that's what matters to the town. And so I think there's a real possibility that having some potential for commercial or residential would be advantageous. That's a place where the town can grow from a residential standpoint without impacting the traffic coming into town each night
Right.
that backs up all the way to Silo Hill Road. And so you can imagine the amount of synergy energy you could generate in that way, while you have a cultural, historic town center and then a new town center, like Paris. Right?
Yeah.
The new city and the old. But the other thing is, yeah, before there's residential, you can certainly make commercial development, especially where people work,
Yeah.
much more walkable
Yeah.
with it. And by having smaller parking areas that are clustered throughout a site rather than having on-site parking in front of each building, because that's not walkable at all. But if you create open spaces and put buildings up on the open spaces and have smaller parking areas with sidewalks that go right to the front doors, you can make it very, very walkable.
I don't like going to the outlet mall.
Which one, in Queenstown? That was just, okay. How's it like going to that one?
You come, you park and then you walk.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sort of.
Okay, next slide. I think this might be the last slide. These are kind of more retail oriented, but very walkable as well. And they seem like something you'd experience in a downtown Emmitsburg on some level. I mean, maybe the scale is different on the left side, and on the right side is lower scale, but it's still very walkable. The one in the middle is more of a kind of a master plan development. And, but I would not, as town planner, I would not advise you that that is out of realm of possibility. I mean, I think the incredible like beauty and vitality of this place calls for developers to bring projects like that in the future if they have the water sewer availability, particularly as urban areas are becoming more expensive and have other issues. This is fantastic opportunity. So you might think about some of these images and say, well, that's long term. And maybe they are perhaps beyond 10 years, but we're thinking about writing code and writing plans that envision a future where seniors could live in town, walk in town and bike to a place like this. Why not have a bicycle bridge carrying traffic from Silo Hill and the new development that would take place in the growth area just on the west side of Route 15 over to this project? We build bike bridges all the time. There was one Route 2. It's built by a golf course of all places. And there are other ones, examples, just beautiful structures that will connect places together. So when you think of a development of the magnitude of that parcel, there is enough economic energy, synergy in a development like that to do off-site improvements that help knit the town together. And you could say, no, we have a walkability ethic in town, a connectability ethic. If you're going to propose a development like that, you have to show us how you're going to connect it to town. It's not okay to send people on bikes over the Route 40 into the interchange. That's just not safe. So this plan, the future plan, could be a lot more expressive about what your goals are and what you can consider to be the future. Or it could be the same, it's entirely up to you. But I'm just saying that there's potential now to really give good guidance to developers. And when I say expectations, this is what I'm kind of talking about. Expectations or illustrations could be in your plan of what things mean. When we talk about mixed use walkable development, this is what we mean. Have a series of pictures. It's very powerful. And then the residents in town know what you mean too when you talk about these terms. Do you have anything to add?
So there's this concept called 15-minute city in urban planning, which kind of compresses off, a settlement where you can get the basic needs done within 15 minutes. Like you would live within 15 minutes of daycare or shopping center, groceries or doctors. So when I see these, I kind of think of that concept.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd bring that and let you guys know about that.
And that ties in very well with the county's comprehensive plan, the Livable Frederick plan. I mean, they emphasize walkability quite a bit and sustainability. And I probably already told you this, but I was part of a scoping group to re-envision the South Frederick Corridors plan as one plan for the Livable Frederick plan. And we're envisioning it. I mean, right now there's very few homes. We're envisioning like 10,000 units when it builds out in 20, 30 years.
Wow.
And it will be less car centric and more walkable and more bicycle friendly and more transit friendly. I mean, the whole traffic patterns will be changed essentially. So yeah, a lot can be done. And I hadn't really thought about this too much till you started saying how much acreage is over there, but
Yeah.
gosh, a lot could be done there if we have, the water and sewer capacity.
Yeah.
It's a biggie. At least water, I guess, is the biggie.
But and you won't have the water and sewer capacity now to develop that whole
Yeah.
parcel unless it's low density, kind of a few scattered industrial parks, kind of places. But you're not planning for the immediate. You're
Right.
planning to, and your plan talks about compact mixed use development. So a parcel, a tract of land that size should rightly develop in small phases according to a long-term master plan, and smaller phases come on so that in each phase it feels like something meaningful and whole, but it's building out over many decades. How long did Emmitsburg take to develop? When you talk about a size parcel the size, it's as big as the core of the town. So it's a long-term endeavor. And so a lot of that area is likely to be or remain in conservation, open space, partially forested or something like that for a long time, if it's done right. Because if the development is clustered in a way that can be served with facilities and services efficiently, it could be walkable, then the rest can remain open space for a long term until it gradually builds out. Yeah, good. Next slide, I think there might be one more. Maybe not. Okay, let's go back 2, please. Okay, so anyway, these are ideas that could actually make their way into a draft plan that we would present to you as we go through the process. So again, we want to kind of make clear what we mean when we say mixed use and walkable and commercial and economic development, things like that. And then we have to write the zoning code to make it, to operationalize it. You know, it's one thing to say what we want, but the other thing is you got to have zoning that allows for that and candidly insists on it. That's a good thing about this, this floating zone. It could really provide you the place where you can enshrine some of these standards into law. And then the town could start implementing it with the first project or with a first project. And that's all I had. Like I said, I had prepared something smaller because I thought we were going to be talking about the
Right.
text of the code, and I was all geared up for
Yeah.
a 3-hour discussion of that. So, any questions?
Are you able to show us on the map the areas where there's 25 acres or more that would be impacted by the change in the code to the flex?
Yeah,
Is that identified on the map
I
at
can just
all?
generally point it out, but maybe what I should do is put together a map that shows that for you.
Yeah, I
so
think
you
that
have
would be
it for the
useful
next
in
would be
time.
terms
good.
of seeing how, where that flex zone is and compared to all the other
Yeah.
zones.
Yep.
In Emmitsburg.
Did
Thank
Did you want 25? I know it right currently I think it's written as 50. Of course, that's up
It's
in the
modified to 25.
Chris is
Well-
recommending it be 20.
be 25.
I just suggested that, right, because if it's 50, then it really only applies in town right now to one property owner.
Yeah.
And we generally don't write code just for one property owner. I mean, I guess suppose it's okay as long everyone knows what we're talking about, but there are other parcels that could be annexed in the future and that are in the town that would become eligible as well.
It would be good to see where those are.
Yes, okay.
Okay. I was thinking though, I know we modified it, but I wasn't sure if I thought that was still up in the air, but
Oh, it was definitely, I just proposed, that
Nothing's settled.
Yeah, we
But-
haven't decided.
nothing's decided.
I thought, okay. God, I can't think, sorry. So right now, like you said, there's only one parcel in town that's
Yeah.
50 plus.
There's actually 2, but they're owned by the same
Okay,
entity.
conglomeration there. Could we also show per the growth map? Because I know that the former Seton Center site where the proposed bypass cuts through is outside of town limits. But if you take that parcel, I'm pretty sure that clears 50 acres.
Can
Could we show like the current in-town 50 and potential 50 and the 25?
Yes.
Like anything
Okay.
between 25 and 50,
Yeah, we'll put together that map. That's good.
just an idea.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Color coded.
Yeah, sure.
Colors.
And anyone that's
Chris,
close
you
to
did like
25.
colors
for the new map.
You got it. Sounds good.
So do we have any homework
Um,
other than read the comprehensive plan?
No, not necessarily,
Yeah.
but good news. If you're interested, on May 25th, the census will finally release the 2020 census data. Right now, we have
Mhm.
population and housing units. That's all we have at the municipal level. The counties have a couple more data points, and the election districts for redistricting have kind of various other demographic categorizations, but the towns only have population housing units, but that's going to change. And so now we can actually update
Yeah.
your demographic section, which is really good. Now you're really going to understand of what the town's like, in terms of family structure, household structure, vacancy rates, split between rental and owner, income, where people work, how long people take to commute to work, all this really good information. It'll really help characterize things, and we'll get a sense of how things have changed over the past 15, 20 years.
That'll be good.
Would you mind sharing the slides with us, like via email?
I
think
wouldn't
it'd
mind
be
at all.
real- Okay,
Yeah,
it'd be great to review those in conjunction with the plan.
we'll send them as a
Very helpful.
PDF, and so you have
That
them.
would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about what we discussed this evening about the comprehensive plan? If not, thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we don't have any new business. So that concludes our business. And our next meeting is
Tuesday, June 27th.
June 27th, Tuesday.
And you'll be here. You're not going to MML?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll be here.
Will you be? Will you be here?
I'm not going to MML.
Oh,
I can make the meeting.
okay.
I'm not gonna be here. It's my friend to go to surgery.
Yeah. Well, if there's no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.